So today I wanted to talk about Split because we all know that Split is coming back, but the devs have said that Split will be coming back with a few changes. And this video was somewhat inspired by Archmedon. I don't know how you say that, but they made a cool video that I will link in the description. Really cool video about reimagining Split, and it had like a ton of new crazy bells and whistles going on and whatnot. I'm not quite sure that map would have been, balanced or, all that playable, but it's really cool what they did, and it was super impressive to me. But I kind of thought, okay, it kind of made me think, like, what changes will they actually make, right? Like, where will the changes be happening? And I'm not a map designer, so I'm not gonna go out and say like, oh, they're gonna rotate this box 90 degrees, just you watch, right? I'm not gonna give like specific examples, but I am gonna highlight, I think, some of the problems that Split had as a map, and so, areas where the devs might be trying to target. And so let's begin, and we're going to start off with, in my opinion, what is problem number one with Split, and that is this B site. Because Split, as we all know, was a defender-sided map, and I think one of the crucial reasons why that was is because of this B site and the difficulty of taking it, particularly in ranked games, right? Because in ranked, a large portion of the player base as a strategy will go, let's group up as 5 and let's run to a site. And if you tried to do that onto this B site, you probably were going to have a bad time. And let me explain why that is. Because, sure, when we first come into this B site, right, we need to take B main first. There could be someone here, right, in pro play, for instance. It's quite common to see someone in an op holding B main, or maybe there's an Omen one way in B main, right, trying to hold that. But it's not impossible to, knock this person off this angle, and taking this space isn't necessarily super hard. So, this is fine. And this played out, I think, okay. But the problems really start of when we, come from B main and we try and get on to the B site. That is when the real problems start, right? Because the first thing is we have a long and pretty narrow choke point here for the attackers to have to deal with. And long and narrow choke points are not attackers' friends, because it means that any raise nade, any sage slow, any, bit of utility essentially can really hamper your chances of trying to get in onto this site, and, will completely stop you dead in your tracks. But even if we deal with that, we then run into the next problem, which is all of the different angles that defenders could potentially be. We have to check our close left. We have to check our close right, and we'll come to this right-hand side in a second. We have to worry about people, potentially peeking out from this box. We have to worry about people peeking out from the other side as well, right? There's quite a few different angles that we're having to worry about as we come onto this site. But then it gets even worse with this right-hand side, because there could be someone on this close right here. There could be someone maybe on top of this box. There could be someone behind this box. There could be someone in hell. There could be someone on the rafters. There could be someone in heaven. This is a ton of different angles and elevations to have to deal with as an attacker. In fact, it's too many angles and elevations to have to deal with as an attacker, alongside checking your close left and behind the box and behind, all of these other stuff that you have to check as well. It's just too much. And so even in pro play, this wasn't just a rank tactic. Even in pro play, it was quite common to see a Sage Wall go across this B area here, right? Just to basically say, I'm not dealing with those angles on that right-hand side. I just don't want to deal with it, right? And this is almost waving the white flag, in a sense, for the attackers, because essentially then what you're having to go for is you're basically, telling the defenders where you are, right? You can't come past this wall all of a sudden, right? You then basically create a almost second choke point for you have to get out of. And you're not going to be able to take the site because you're just, surrendering all of this space at that point, right? You're just surrendering and basically praying you can win the fights. You're praying you can probably get the spike down behind this box, and then playing a pretty terrible post plant where you have, if I go and draw like the control that you might have in that kind of post plant, you essentially have B main and a tiny slither of the site, and the defenders have everything else, right? And that is just not a good position to be in whatsoever. And when you are designing a site, I think as a map designer, the goal is for the attackers to probably take all or most of the site. Whereas in this instance for Split, often what would happen is this, right? Where we're taking a tiny portion of the site and just praying to get the spike down. That's not really what I would call like a healthy site design. That's probably not what was intended for the attackers. And this, by the way, is why mid is so important on Split, because let's say we do a B split and we come from heaven and through B main, all of a sudden a lot of our problems get alleviated, right? Where if we've come and taken heaven, all of a sudden all these angles on this right hand side we were worried about before the people in heaven should have a pretty favorable fight against those people. You know, they should be able to, you know, win a fight in those instances if we're coming through heaven. And our post plant, if we've got heaven control, all of a sudden goes from having a tiny sliver of the site to having all of the site and heaven, right? Which is just so much of a difference, right? The map control we have is crazy different if we just come and take heaven as well. And that, I think, is the problem with this whole kind of B side of the map, is that rushing through B main as a 5, your success chance is going to be very low. But if you can take heaven and come to a B split, your success rate all of a sudden is really, really good. So it's almost like too much of an extreme, right? Where one is super, super low chance. One is like, if we can do this, we have a super good chance of winning the round. It just puts too much emphasis on one thing because the difference on the margin of victory is probably going to be pretty stark. But when it comes to the A site, I thought that this played out in a much more healthy way than the B site. Let me explain. Because once we've taken this A main area here, or we've got some control to get to this point, we then have options as the attackers. And this is something we don't have with that B site, right? We're just forced to go one direction. Here on this A site, we have different options, right? We can come towards heaven, or we can come towards the site instead. And those options keep defenders on their toes. It means, you know, they can't just commit to defending one thing. You know, they have to think about the different places we could go into. And so it just makes it a bit easier for the attackers. That, and alongside the fact that this wall here means that when we come just out of this choke point here, we only have to really worry about this left-hand side and straight ahead, right? There is no close right to be dealing with. We can clear all of our close left, then come around this corner and clear everything on the right-hand side, which again just kind of makes it a bit easier, right? You're not just being thrown out into the wilderness, you know, with angles everywhere coming at you. You can kind of, you know, one by one clear different parts. Yes, the defenders can be on top or below on this left-hand side, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as the B site. But let's also talk about heaven on this A site, because the key identity, I think, or one of the key identities of Split was the fact that it was a mid-heavy map, right? And so I don't want that to disappear. I don't want, you know, mid to just not be important on Split, because that would kind of feel like the map is kind of betraying what, you know, it was or should be. But this A site managed to keep mid important without making it necessary. And that, I think, is the key difference to the B site, where on B, taking heaven was necessary. Whereas taking heaven here on A was ideal. It wasn't necessary, but it would help you. And let's explain why it would help you. Because yes, I think that you could get the spike down here on A, just coming through A main and, you know, rushing onto the site or whatnot. And that wouldn't be too difficult. But if we didn't take heaven, we would run into a bit of a problem where the attackers, or well, the retakers, the defenders, the retakers now, can come from different angles, right? They can come from CT, they can come from heaven, they can come from A main, and they can basically pinch on you on the site and come from 3 different positions. Very difficult to kind of hold that as you know, the kind of defenders of the spike. Once we've got the spike down, difficult post plan to play. But again, if we did take all of heaven, all of a sudden those defenders options become quite limited in that, you know, if you've got flank watching capabilities as well, you know, they can basically only come from CT or, you know, try and retake heaven. And so it becomes very predictable where they're going to come from instead, which, you know, makes this post plan a lot easier in general. Also, if we did manage to get the spike down here as well, you know, with heaven control, it's kind of a nightmare to try and retake as the defenders. So mid was still important, you know, trying to take that heaven area was still important to how the post plant may play out, but it wasn't necessary to actually try and just get onto the site and go from there. And that, I think, was the crucial difference. So overall, I expect less changes to this A site. I'm not going to say it's going to go unchanged. There probably will change, you know, 1 or 2 things, but I would be surprised if the A site changed more than the B site. But then finally, let's finish with mid, and just very quickly, we all know the importance of mid on this map of Split, and I think probably, you know, that we might see some slight changes here in mid, just to make it maybe a bit more attackers friendly, maybe opening up or widening spaces so that you don't get destroyed by one bit of utility, or, you know, maybe just, you know, changing angles slightly to make it, you know, a bit easier for the attackers in general. You know, those kind of things, those kind of small things where, you know, it's just going to make life for the attackers coming through mid maybe just a bit easier, right? So that they don't just feel like they just have no chance. They're just running into a brick wall, which often could be the case on this map. So yeah, that's kind of what I expect overall. Big changes towards that B site, probably some changes to mid as well, opening up spaces and whatnot. The A site, I think largely they could remain untouched, and I wouldn't be too too bothered, to be honest. I think that honestly that A site wasn't too bad overall, and so that's kind of what I'm expecting here for this map.